As we roll into 2025, there's no stopping what's going on. And as we know, Texas leads, America follows. We visit with Chris Hosek to see how the 89th legislation here in Texas is going to go in 2025 on this episode of The Crude Truth.
In 1901, at Spindletop Hill near Beaumont, the future of Texas changed dramatically as, like a fountain of fortune, thousands of barrels of oil burst from the earth towards the sky. Soon, Detroit would be cranking out Model Ts by the millions, and America was on the move, thanks to the black gold being produced in Texas. Now, more than a century later, the vehicles are different, but nothing else has truly changed. Sure, there may be many other alternative energy sources like wind and solar and electric. But let's be honest, America depends on oil and entrepreneurs, and if the USA is truly going to be independent, it has to know the crude truth.
This episode is brought to you by LFS Chemistry. We are committed to being good stewards of the environment. We are providing the tools so you can be too. NAPE Expo, where deals happen. Air Compressor Solutions. When everything is on the line, Air Compressor Solutions is the dependable choice to keep commercial business powered up. Sandstone Group. Exec Crew. Elevate your network, elevate your knowledge. Texas Star Alliance. Pecos Country Operating. Fueling our future.
Well, thank you as always for tuning in to another episode of The Crude Truth. Here we are. It is 2025 and everything is just moving forward as if 2024 hopefully didn't even happen in some ways, as a lot of my viewers would like to say. President Trump has just been sworn in. Here, the legislation has just started. Here, as you can tell, I'm shooting from our studios here in Austin as I get all jumbled up today. I'm just really excited because 2025 for the oil and gas industry is really going to just ramp up. And to really dive in, we got to talk about the state of Texas and what's going on here. As in my teaser, there's no doubt about it. The state of Texas, we lead the nation in so many things that what happens here for the next almost 6 months is really going to dictate how the rest of the United States goes. So today, as I mentioned in my teaser, I've got on another great guest, somebody that is a sponsor of the show. I have to say that out there, so thank you as always. My guest today is Chris Hosek of Texas Star Alliance. Chris.
Ray, thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you. And that took forever to introduce you. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Gosh.
No, it's
There's
no problem at all.
There's a lot going on.
There is a lot going on. Yes, on January 14th, our legislature was sworn in.
Yes.
We go for about 140 days. So when sometime early June. The session is really designed to start slow in the process. Mm-hmm. So things will move slowly at the beginning and then really ramp up kind of March, April, May, and that's really the sprint. Yeah. It's kind of a very interesting process because in those later months, you can be up at the Capitol for 15 to 20 hours a day, sitting in hearings, listening to your issues and working your bills. So It's a very interesting process. Would encourage your listeners and your viewers to participate in it because, it affects them, it impacts their industry, and especially the oil and gas industry.
And Chris, that's why I asked you to come on when I called you up and they were like, hey, session's starting. It's like Texas Star Alliance is really involved in a positive way in everything that's going on at session, not just the oil and gas space, but all the parts of it. It really started out kind of fireworks were there on the first day a little bit. Is that a fair statement?
There were. I think we experienced something that we haven't experienced in a while. It was a very serious speakers race.
Yes.
And the end result was Speaker Dustin Burrows. He's a Republican from Lubbock, is the new Speaker of the House. He was in leadership last time. So we're getting ready to work with him again and work on all our issues. We'll see a committee assignments probably be appointed here in a month, excuse me. And that's a very challenging process. There's 150 members, both Republicans and Democrats are going to be serving on these committees. And every committee covers every issue in the state.
Right.
And every member and the 150 members has their issues they specifically care about. So these committee assignments are extremely important to them.
Well, when they're looking at how they do the committees. Let's talk about that for a minute. Let me ask
Sure.
you, well, how is it that one group gets a one deal out or another? What kind of committees do we have here on the state?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
what's really interesting is I think you hear every speaker talk about what a challenge it is. So
Right.
you have 150 members go to the speaker and talk about their preferences, what they want. So they have a preference pick and then they have a seniority pick. And depending on how long they're here, their seniority rises, right? So that gives a little bit more weight to it. But the speaker also has to balance his picks with rural or urban or suburban and the different parties in different areas of the state. It's the Panhandle represented on this committee, is the Gulf Coast represented on a certain committee. So it's a very complicated puzzle they have to put together, and a task that I would not envy because unfortunately, not everybody's going to get what they want. So some people, I think at the end of the process, are always a little bit frustrated, but it is a jigsaw puzzle that I do not envy to put together.
It almost sounds like in some ways like the Electoral College to make sure that you've got at least a say from every part, the Panhandle, East Texas, Gulf Coast, I guess then South Texas and West Texas?
Yeah, I mean, we got a big state here,
Right,
and everybody, wants to represent a certain part of every speaker wants to have every area covered. So I think it's a very significant challenge for him.
Well, with all these people being represented, what are some of the key issues this session that we're going to be talking about?
Right. Now, from an overall perspective, and what we heard a lot during the primaries and the general election were an issue of vouchers. I mean, Texas is one state that does not have a voucher system. It's public education and private school. It was a big fight last session. Yes. A bill made it out of the Senate and had challenges getting out of the House. A lot of primary campaigns were run on this issue. And the governor himself invested a lot of capital into it.
Yes. And
the governor's candidates he chose won pretty significantly. So I suspect this is going to be a very key issue. It's divisive, but I foresee it being one of the priorities, at least in the Senate, and the governor and the House is going to take it up and address it.
If I may, I want to dive into the vouchers for just a minute because I don't understand this one at all. And so you mentioned that, first of all, that it got out of the Senate. Now, does that mean it passed the Senate or it got to the Senate floor for a vote?
No, that's right. So what it did is the bill passed out of the Senate itself, right? And it's got a bill has to pass both chambers, then it goes to the governor's desk for signature.
Okay.
So that's the process. A bill can originate in either house.
Mm-hmm.
So a House bill can go through the Senate, then to the governor, or a Senate bill can go through the House to the governor.
Okay.
So that was the process in which it happened last session. Stay tuned on what that looks like. Those are always long nights when those bills are heard in committee. And I personally don't represent any education clients on that. So I'm kind of a bystander to it. This was also an issue last session that the governor called special session after special session on. So you may remember the legislature was here until midsummer, throughout the summer working on this issue. And it was unable to pass then. So we'll see what it looks like this time.
So with diving into it just a little bit more, since I know you don't got a foot in the race by any form, what is it about the vouchers that either is good and or bad on both sides of that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, what you're there's two different sides of the argument, right? Okay. There's only a finite amount of dollars for public schools. Mm-hmm. And then yet schools that are in challenging districts, parents want to use the right to send their tax dollar or get vouchers from the state and send their kids to a different school that may be performing a little bit better. So it's a real complicated issue. I know it's hard to simplify in a couple seconds, but but it's been a contentious issue. Other states have passed these programs. Other states don't have them. So in the past 20 years, I think you've seen a lot of movement from it's kind of more Republican states into passing these type of voucher programs. So and I thank you for that because having a 3-year-old, I down the road. Wow, I feel sorry for you right now. With zone defense.
It's a full zone defense right now.
That's right.
In fact, during the Christmas holiday, it's fun. You can get him new blue jeans and he's happy. And kid you not, I get him a new pair of jeans, Chris, and he goes, "For the oil field." Kid you not, like that tracked me down. And my brothers are in the back just going, yes. And Duke's mom is just right there going, oh no. But no, I appreciate that because I've got some good friends that are on one side of the issue and some people that I know that are on the other side. And for me, I don't understand it, right? Because, the Crude Truth, we talk about oil and gas primarily. And it's like, what are some of these other big issues that are going on here in the great state of Texas?
That's a dominant one. I think what you're going to look at too, which does impact us, is water. And,
yes.
So that cuts two different ways. I mean, we're looking to upgrade our water infrastructure. Or, there was a fund that's going to be proposed around $5 billion from a Senator Perry in the Panhandle. He's a water expert. Okay. Actually, we're lucky to have a man that understands this issue, which is a very complicated issue, as though it doesn't sound like it. But he is he's really taking a deep dive into this, and he's trying to prep Texas for the future and our future growth. It's pretty significant, and we're going to need those resources. Now, on the oil and gas side, I think what we're looking at is the produced water issue, kind of how we handle produced water in the Permian Basin. I know the Railroad Commission is taking a hard look at it, and I know the legislature will too. Yeah.
You talk about the water issues in West Texas and on all the produced water. We've got such a thing going on out there where we just don't know what we're going to start to do with it. It's almost turned really into the natural gas. It's like we can't flare produced water, but we just continue. Water comes up with oil no matter what, right? 9 times out of 10. And sometimes I like to joke saying we actually produce water, then we just get oil on the side.
Well, there's something to that. It's the amount of water that's produced. So, I see that being an issue. Also another issue that we should probably touch on a little bit is the funding of our regulatory agencies. Okay. So the Railroad Commission needs to be properly funded. Mm-hmm. We need to have good field inspectors. We need to have a strong hearing and examination process. So I know the commission is, and every 2 years we reset our budget. So the commission has to go back and lay their budget out in front of the legislature and work on these issues. So that's the commission's budget's always an issue. IT is always an issue at the commission. Yeah. Trying to get kind of the latest and greatest IT so they can function, at a level that industry's functioning, right? A lot of times they're not. So that's we're going to be looking at Railroad Commission funding this session as well.
What do you see as one of the important ones there on the funding for the Railroad Commission? Do you see it from the IT? Like, let's say you had to pick, not to be a devil's advocate, because God knows get real-time information, which I think is where the Railroad Commission is trying to get to, just like our companies are. But then you've got the orphan wells that just continue to be a pain. And then we have all this money from the federal government that we seem to not be able to get. And it's not even the Railroad Commission's fault that they can't disperse it.
Right. Well, you're right. The orphan well problem, that's a big issue, right? And, unfortunately, they've had some very expensive wells. So that eats into those funds pretty quickly. And so I know the commission is going back to ask for more money to plug these orphan wells. And so that's kind of on the back side of it. Now there's legislation they're looking at right now to kind of address these issues on the front side of it. So if you're there's a certain amount of inactive wells in the state, and those tend to flow into the orphan well program. And what the idea is to try to get at these inactive wells before they move to that program. So I know the industry itself is talking about what that looks like, what the formula looks like on how many inactive wells you can carry, how long can you carry them. And so that's yet to be determined. I mean, that's why we have a legislative process. So I'm highly confident we're going to see a bill on that. And it's just what that bill looks like is going to be a challenge, but that's why we're in this business.
Right. So with that, I know for us as an operator, we got to make sure that we're plugging 10% of our number of wells a year. And by plugging it, I mean either plugging it or putting it online. Are they thinking of changing that number, that percentage number, or are they looking to?
Well, it's a whole range of things and options are on the table. So, I mean, I think what they'll do is, I think one thing they're going to look at is how long you can carry an inactive well itself. Okay. Like the year, how long that will be. Right. Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Is it, it's not going to be in perpetuity. I think that day is past. And this is this is something that the industry's been looking at and we've been studying. And, we're going to work on this bill and this legislation this session, see if we can't come to a good compromise.
Yeah. You talk about inactive wells. I know we just got done in January plugging, 3 or 4 wells. Okay. Yeah. And, already getting ahead of the numbers for the year. Right. And one of the wells that we plugged actually was drilled in 1958. Wow. Produced oil to the mid 80s. and then was an injection well for the next 20 years or so.
Wow.
And this is a lease that we picked up, 15, 20 years ago. And, it's just amazing how long these wells can actually serve as a positive to the oil and gas industry and the American people. And also the fact that you talk about the inactives, I don't know how many times I've turned down an oil and gas lease because it might have great production, but the amount of inactive wells on it is just so many that it's like, that's a plugging liability. And you hate to throw it away, especially with what I like to think is the relationships that I've been able to build with y'all and the Railroad Commission. But it's like, I can't afford to plug that many wells. And, and the bad part is neither can the people that have the lease right now.
Right. Yeah. It's a balancing act,
Yes,
right? So,
yeah.
I mean, you have to look at the whole package itself and what makes sense for you and it's going to work or not.
Right.
And that's kind of the challenge we face kind of at a much larger level in the state. So
Right.
that's where you can see the genesis of this legislation coming from.
Yeah.
It's your little snapshot. It's kind of a good cross section of what's going on.
And that
in
was something
Texas.
we were
Yeah.
talking about, me and my father, on the way here. It's like, we picked up some leases from some other individuals, and it's like, okay, they did this and they did this and they did this. And it's like, well, let's just do it the right way.
Right.
And it takes a little bit of time. You never do the right stuff overnight.
Right. So it's interesting we're talking about this. So at the beginning of the session, the controller gets his biannual revenue estimate.
Mm-hmm.
And in his revenue estimate this time, we're going to have a $24 billion surplus. It is much larger than any other states around. And Texas is blessed to have that kind of opportunity. But as you heard the comptroller say, you have to use it wisely.
Yeah.
And, do we do one-time investments in critical infrastructure like water,
Mm-hmm.
like transportation? These are things that are going to help Texas grow and address the needs while we're growing. But it is an amazing number to say 24 billion when you look at it's much larger than probably a dozen total states budgets is our surplus. So that's pretty exciting.
On a total random question, how many more people do you think are going to be moving into Texas? I mean, because you talked about infrastructure, and
Right.
we got to get prepared. Obviously, the freeze taught us something. Of course, it was one of those once in a generation or 100-year freezes a couple of years back. But Texas is only growing. Austin, that we're in, hasn't stopped growing now for 20 years.
Right.
And it's like, how important do you think the infrastructure is in this session?
Right. I think it's important every session to get these type of projects done because Texas is going to continue to grow. I mean, if I lived somewhere else, I'd try to move here, right? I mean,
Right.
It's a beautiful state to live in, and there's a lot of economic opportunity here. And that's part of what we do in the legislature is make sure that when people do move here, they do have that economic opportunity that every citizen enjoys here in Texas.
Yeah, no, it's been great. And, there's no doubt that the first few days, the way that session has gone, it's going to be pretty exciting. I mean, I remember just, it blows my mind. This has been now, it feels like it was yesterday, the last session, when I had a great chance to meet with the former president of the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers, Jason Modulin. And they were just gearing up for that, him and David Blackman. And now we're back at it again. I can't believe it.
Right. It happens pretty quickly.
It does. And I don't envy those Congress people over there at all. They're on a 2-year cycle.
They are. And it's, I've been doing this long enough and, I've been married 25 years and I've done it my whole career. So my wife has kind of understand the cycles of the legislature and she jokes sometimes, she calls herself a session widow because 6 months out of the year, every 2 years, we're working here kind of nonstop,
Right.
starting in the morning, going pretty late at night. And, but it is a very kind of interesting business to be in and I love it and it's exciting.
Well, what is one thing that you are excited about from this session that maybe you hope to see out of this session that we're going to be in?
Well, I don't know if there's one thing I would say I'm really excited about, but there are some certain clients I have that we've discussed before. For example, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the elephant preserve that I represent in Fredericksburg, Texas. It's a beautiful facility, and I think one thing I'm excited about this session is kind of to expand kind of the knowledge and the education of Asian elephants. Okay. And for an oil and gas guy, that sounds like a weird thing to say, but it's an exciting issue to work on. And it's, they have 3 Asian elephants out there that were, past movie stars in California. And and they, like everybody else from California, decided to move to Texas. And so not just people, but elephants are moving to Texas. This was about 10 years ago. But, I love going around talking about kind of how they're an endangered species and what we can do to kind of protect them.
And what's the name of that preserve?
It's actually called the Preserve.
The Preserve.
That's
okay.
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
And if I'm correct, there's a porcupine there named Little Chris.
That's right.
And how is Little Chris doing?
Little Chris is doing great.
Yes.
He's an African crested porcupine, and love to go out there and play with him. He's very friendly. You may not believe it, but you're allowed to pet him sometimes, and he's a cute little dude.
Man, I can only imagine that must be kind of fun.
Yes, I've been teased about it a lot. Because when they did name the animal after me, a porcupine is a rodent.
Yeah.
It does smell bad and it's prickly. So I don't think I thought that one out too well, but Little Chris is Little Chris. Or Chris.
Or Chris.
Or Chris, what you call him.
Well, Chris, I know you're about in this now again for 140 days or 80 days. How many is it?
140.
140 days. You're about to be here. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
I mean, I can't thank you enough from where I sit on everything that you're doing. Because again, it's not overnight. This is a bunch of long hours that you're about to be in. And I can only imagine the stories you're about to hear.
Right. Well, I can't, I'm excited to get this session started and look forward to it. And let's check back in a couple months and I'll tell you how great it's going or how horrible it's going for me.
Again, I can't thank you enough with all that y'all are doing, the Texas Star Alliance. And, the easiest thing to say is really just keep up the good fight.
We'll try. Thank you, Ray.
Chris, thank you.
Good seeing you.
Thank you. Well, guys, again, get ready for a bunch more fireworks if you haven't already heard about them there from the Texas State Capitol. This is going to be a momentous legislative session. We're going to definitely do our best to stay on it this year. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. If you got any questions about what's going on, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm going to do my best also this year to really stay on it and just kind of keep everybody up to date with what's going on. Again, this is Rey Treviño, and thank you for always as watching The Crude Truth.
Again, The Crude Truth would like to thank today's sponsors: LFS Chemistry, NAPE Expo, Air Compressor Solutions, Sandstone Group, Exec Crew, Texas Star Alliance, Pecos Country Operating, and Real News Communication Network.
The easiest way to start your own podcast and TV show? Real News Communications Network. Stand out from your competition. Produce streams of high-quality social media content. Become a thought leader in your industry. With RNCN, you get to be the host. We handle everything else. Tour one of our 3 locations in Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Colony. Call 972-402-6333 or visit launchashow.com to find out more.